What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. Today we have a book wrap-up video, which is one of my favorites to film. I'm super excited to share all the books that I read in the month of June with you. I had a little bit of a slower reading month than I normally do, and just to say, I fly through books because I'm usually reading like spicy romances that are pretty fast to get through, but it was just kind of a crazy month for me, so a little bit lighter on what I read in June, but I did decide that because we are halfway through the year, this would be a great time to share all of my 5-star reads that I've had this year. So we're gonna go over all of my 5-star reads. If you've never been here before, when I do these reviews, they're always spoiler free. I share my thoughts on the book, a tiny little summary about it, and then I usually give a star rating and a spice rating so you know whether or not there's spice in any of the romances or thrillers I may have read. When I do my rating, I don't have like a fancy scale or anything. I just go based on how I felt when I finished the book. When I go over my 5-star reads though, I probably won't go like in full detail about them. I'll just give the list of the books and probably a little snippet of why I loved it so much. If you want to see more detail on my actual review and thoughts and ratings and all of that, please feel free to go back and watch any of my videos from earlier this year because those books will be featured inside those videos. In the description box down below, I will have a list of all of the books that we covered for both June and for my 5-star reads this year. So if you need to screenshot or anything like that, so you know when you go to the library or bookstore what I thought was great, you'll be able to have an easy way of doing that. If you don't already follow me on the Bookstagram, please feel free to check me out. It's at Kate Chapters. I'll be putting it up on the screen, but it's always linked in the description box. And I have a lot of book content over there. I do reviews 3 to 4 a week. I also love to come up with different lists of books. So recently I've been doing like a states list where I say a state and then 1 or 2 books that I loved that was set in that state. I've done like book talk books, what I thought on it compared to what Goodreads people thought about it, stuff like that. So feel free to check out my Instagram if you love to talk about books just like me. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. We're going to start with the books that I read in the month of June, and I started it off with a historical fantasy actually, and it's What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This one was actually a pick of mine from Book of the Month, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on stars. There is no spice on it. It's borderline kind of young adult almost. The main character in it is, I believe, a teenager or a very young adult. So this one follows Inez, who's living the life of luxury in Buenos Aires, and she's under the very watchful eye of her aunt. But she gets the awful news that her parents have disappeared in Egypt, and she decides to take off and find out what happened to them. So this book started out incredibly strong for me. I was sucked into it right away. I loved the vibe of the book, and I loved the dual culture that was happening. So it had touches of Argentinian culture and then also touches of Egyptian culture. It's set back in the 1800s, and I just found it to be fascinating, and it was very easy to sink into. What I didn't love is the book gets incredibly repetitive. It felt like every single fight that the 2 main characters have revolved around the exact same situation. And there was 2 point of views in this book, but it felt like the male's point of view did absolutely nothing for me as a reader, because the female was completely in the dark for a lot of stuff that was going on. And you would think that the male's point of view would fill the reader in as to what was going on, but his point of view pretty much was completely useless to me because it didn't fill in any of the details. So I felt as confused as the female main character was. Towards the back half of it, there's some twists that start to pop in. Some of them were predictable, but they definitely like re-engaged me into the story. And I think that because this is the first book in the series, it does end on a cliffhanger. I'm hoping that it's just going to continue to get stronger as the series goes on. If you are looking for like an Indiana Jones or like National Treasure type vibe where you're kind of chasing a mystery, I would definitely recommend this book. It was a solid 4-star for me. It was just that middle section that just kind of lost me a little bit. All right, the next book that I read was called Heidi's Guide to 4-Letter Words, and it's by Tara Sivek and Andy Arndt. This one is a spicy romance. I gave it 4 out of 5 on the stars and 1 out of 5 on the spice. This one follows Heidi, who was just laid off from being a kindergarten teacher, and it's kind of giving her an opportunity to take a close look at her life, and she decides that she might not want to be a teacher after all. So she takes a job at a recording studio, and they record spicy novels. and she's very sheltered, so it's eye-opening for her. And after consuming an entire box of wine one night, she decides to start a podcast, and she lets everybody know about an insane crush she has on her neighbor. This book was incredibly awkward, but in the most adorable way. There are a few moments that kind of touch the line of cringy, but I just thought Heidi was absolutely adorable. She's very sheltered, she's very like Midwestern, and she's just a really adorable character. I loved her mom and her aunt. I haven't spent a lot of time in the Midwest. Actually, I don't think I've spent any time in the Midwest, and I haven't spent a lot of time with people from the Midwest, but based on the movies that I've seen and things like that, the mom and the aunt are exactly the quintessential Midwesterners that I expect them to be. They were just adorable. They were very, like, their heart came from the right place, but they were meddling a little bit. There was some small town gossip happening. It was just, I don't know, like I said, being an outsider, that's what I expect from adorable Midwesterners. This is a romance, but I don't know, the love story felt a little weak to me because it felt like kind of Heidi had a crush on her neighbor because he was hot, and then I knew nothing else about his personality. It didn't feel like anything else was happening there. But I loved the idea of the podcast and how she kind of stumbled into it. And I also loved how it didn't like blow up to be an overnight sensation. Like, you know, she went viral overnight. It ends up being kind of like a slow build, and I just thought it was done really cute. So overall, if you're looking for just like a quirky, fun, escape type of a read, this one would be the one for you. All right, the next book that I read was called Fool Them Once by Kyra Parsi. And this one is a spicy romance. I gave it a 5 out of 5 on stars, 1 out of 5 on spice. This one follows Skylar, who is in Toronto for a few months with an internship opportunity, and one of her friends tells her that she can stay in her penthouse while she's taking the internship because her and her family have lots of different properties. Well, apparently her friend failed to mention it to the rest of the family, and all of a sudden her brother shows up in the penthouse wondering who the heck and Bob is staying at his place. He decides that he can use this situation to his advantage, and Skylar is not so great at saying no. Okay, so if you've never read a Kyra Parsi book before, I think this is maybe my third from her. I'm just obsessed with her writing style. She has this way of making billionaire romances feel like cozy romances. Like, the billionaire aspect is awesome, but then she has these like really quirky and awkward characters against them that just make them feel very balanced out. There are major miscommunications going on in this book, which is usually not my favorite thing, but I liked the way it was handled in this book. It felt like things were being revealed at the right pace. And I just felt like the couple was very honest and open with each other despite those miscommunications, and they found a way to kind of stumble through the situations together, even though both of them were not prepared as individuals to take it on. So it just felt like really like a true love story that you could relate to, and it was for some reason a book that I just did not want to put down, and it was really easy to fall into. And I definitely recommend Kyra Parsi as an author, so please go look her up. A lot of her books are on Kindle Unlimited. If you have that, I would definitely recommend downloading one. Okay, the next book that I read was a historical romance, and this was Queen Charlotte by Julia Quinn and Shonda Rhimes. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on the stars and 1 out of 5 on the spice. This is a prequel to the Bridgerton series books. I have read 3 of the Bridgerton books, but I haven't read all of them. But I personally think that you could start with Queen Charlotte if you wanted to, because it's a prequel. You might just be a little bit confused about the universe, but in general, I feel like it's something that you could dive into. This one follows a German princess, Charlotte, who is arranged to marry the King of England, George, by her brother. And she gets sent there and tries to escape, but George ends up bewitching her basically and convinces her to marry him. At first, she's hopeful that this marriage will resort in resembling something like true love, but he is giving her a lot of mixed signals. He has a lot of secrets that he's carrying and things that he's working through on his own, and she starts to feel like maybe it is just a business arrangement after all. Okay, so the thing with this book is it's very unique, and it was very unexpected. Like I said, I have read the Bridgerton series, so I was kind of expecting it to be similar to the other books. And I feel like this one, it does have a lot of the underlying themes, but I thought she took some creative outlets with this one that I really enjoyed. First of all, it's not a dual point of view. It's actually a quad point of view, I guess you would call it. There's 4 people, and it's interesting the characters that they chose to have points of view. So George and Charlotte have points of views, which makes sense if you've read romances before, that the male and the female love match have their points of view. But it's also one of the butlers and then one of the advisors slash friends that Charlotte ends up becoming involved with. And I just thought it was really cool how that was done. It gave more depth to the entire story by having their points of view. The book started out incredibly strong for me. I really enjoyed it at the beginning, and I really thought it was going to be like a complete 5-star read. But towards probably like the 3rd way mark, I started to just kind of feel indifferent to both Charlotte and George. I just kind of didn't care what happened to them. And so once I got to that point, it was kind of hard for me to be pulled back in. I overall though thought it was definitely an enjoyable read. One of the things that I love about it is the book is incredibly inclusive, and a lot of the inclusive elements that they bring into the book weren't done in like a performative way. I felt it was more honest and true to the time frame, but it still identified some of the things that were happening, and I thought that was a really great way to get that voice out there. If you are a fan of the Bridgerton shows or you've ever been interested in it, this might be one that you'd want to pick up. All right, the next book that I read was called A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. I'm a weirdo, and like every time July is coming up, I kind of use that as my excuse to read some Christmas books, because I'm like, you know, Christmas in July. So one of the books that I've had on my TBR for a while is this book. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 on the stars and then 1 out of 5 on Spice. This one is a holiday romance, and it follows Iris, who's a very talented chef who's had some things happen in her life, and she decides to move to New York City because that is a place that her late mother loved, and she's hoping to find a connection there. What I loved about this book is the vibes are very strong. I don't know if you guys have watched the movie You've Got Mail, but what I loved about You've Got Mail is there was something about that way that movie was done where it just felt like you sunk into New York City in the fall, and I feel like this book did that for New York City in the winter. Like I felt like I was really immersed in the sights and sounds and smells of New York City. The author does a really great job at describing that. But in terms of the characters and the story itself, I just never could connect to it. So there was 2 miscommunications going on, and I felt like they carried on for way longer than was actually reasonable and realistic. It just went on for way too long, and it just made me really dislike the characters. I did, however, love the background characters. There's kind of like an Italian family situation happening, and I really enjoyed them because they were just kind of like a great comedic relief with everything going on. This is definitely not like a light, fluffy Christmas romance, but if you're looking for something that has deeper elements to it, there's a lot of healing moments in this book when it comes to navigating grief. This could be the one for you. It wasn't a complete love for me, but I did enjoy the whole escaping to New York feeling and running a gelato shop with an Italian family. That was a lot of fun. All right, you guys, the next book was Wild Love by Elsie Silver. This book ended up really surprising me because the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver, they're cowboy romances, and they're all over social media. Like, everybody is obsessed with the Chestnut Springs series. I liked them, but I didn't love them. I didn't understand the hype of them, but I'm happy for people that love those books. But I went into this book thinking that I'd probably feel lukewarm about it because of the fact that it's the same writer as Chestnut Springs. Could not have been more wrong. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on stars and 2 out of 5 on Spice. So this one follows Rosalie, who has built herself a life in the city, but it all falls apart because of something that wasn't even her fault. So she ends up running back to her hometown and convinces her brother's best friend, who she cannot stand, to hire her, and she's shocked when he says yes. After I finished this book, it took me a minute to realize why I loved this book so much, because I was sitting there, it was just like a simple hometown romance, brother's best friend, they used to hate each other, he used to pick on her growing up, all of that good stuff. pretty straightforward, and I was sitting there trying to figure out why I loved it so much, and then I realized it was because I loved Rosalie. She's the main female character in this, and I feel like she had the perfect balance of being feisty and sassy, but being unsure of herself. I loved the way the main male character, Ford, helps her work through those insecurities. I thought that it was just adorable, and I loved their banter with each other when they were in like their enemies vibes, their witty banter that was going back and forth. I was literally cackling at some points because they were so funny. Her comebacks were so funny. Ford is like a billionaire in this book, but he also has kind of like this nerdy element to it. So I don't know. And then he also is a billionaire who recognizes that he comes from privilege because his dad is like a rock star, but he also had parents who made sure to set him up to not be ungrateful for the things that he was given. And it was just, I don't know, it was just really refreshing. I thought the background characters were hilarious. It's set like in a Canadian mountain town. I gave it a 2 out of 5 on Spice. So I do want to warn you, Spice does take up a good amount of real estate in this book, but I felt like the scenes were written really, really well. And overall, it's just a definite recommend for me. And I believe it is available on Kindle Unlimited if you have that. All right, the next book that I read was Plotting Summer by Jess Heileman, who is one of my favorite authors. I got to read an early copy of this in exchange for an honest review. But if you're new here, I would never, ever jeopardize my integrity just because I got a free digital download of a book. So rest assured, even if an author has provided me a book in exchange for an honest review, it will be honest. But this one I absolutely loved. It's a squeaky clean romance, 5 out of 5 on the stars, 0 out of 5 on Spice. So this one follows Capri, who had spent her adolescent years being obsessed with the boy next door. He pretty much doesn't even realize she exists, but one day they have an interaction that makes her think that there's a possibility. But when it ends up amounting to nothing, she decides to rewrite their romance in the way that she wished it had happened, and she does it under a pen name. Well, 10 years later, she's a very successful author using that pen name, and she's mortified with the idea of anyone from her hometown figuring it out, because if they do, they'll know exactly how deep her obsession with him ran. This book was just darling. It was darling. When I stopped reading it, that was just the word that came to my mind. It has very nostalgic rom-com feelings to it. Almost gave me a little bit of like a Never Been Kissed vibe. The plot is completely different, but the way that the awkwardness and quirkiness of the main female character and her being super successful but having to come back and conceal her identity basically in her hometown, it was just really well done. I absolutely loved the romance element. There was a very traditional romance sense to it. There was like a friends to lovers situation happening, and they kind of go on little outings together, and I just loved how the outings were set up because it just felt like the ultimate romance of them trying to plan things for the other that the other would enjoy. Overall, I could not recommend this book enough. And Jess Heileman as an author, I have literally now read every single book she's published, and every single one was a 5-star. All right, the next book that I read was Isabel and the Rogue by Liana de la Rosa. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly. This one is a historical romance. I gave it a 4.5 star out of 5 on the stars, and then 1 out of 5 on the Spice. This one follows Isabel, who is the middle sister. Her older sister is brave and daring. Her younger sister is gorgeous and charismatic, and she's found herself in the role of wallflower in their sister trio. When she finds out that she can assist her home country of Mexico by looking for information, she decides to lean into the fact that everybody always ignores her, but there's one man that she can't seem to escape the attention of, and he continues to get in her way. There's a little bit of a political element to it. It's set like in either the 1800s or like early 1900s, and it's set in England. But the sisters are from Mexico, and they're trying to help Mexico out by getting information in England, but they have to be very strategic about it. And I just loved how the romance kind of took a back seat to that. And when the romance was weaved in, it was so strong. I loved how the female character developed throughout this book. She starts off feeling incredibly insecure about herself. She feels down about herself. She's constantly comparing herself to her sisters. But as the book goes on, she starts to realize all of the strength that she has. And I loved the way the male main character starts to really build on that with her and starts to really reassure her that she is correct, and he starts to really point out all of the strengths that she has. I also loved the way that there was a lot of injustices that were highlighted in this book, and like I was talking about with the Queen Charlotte book, I don't feel like it was done in a way that was like pretty and tied up with a neat little bow. It felt like a very honest look at the injustices that were happening. And it just made me want to really look into this time frame. And one thing that I love is the author at the end of the book has a author's note, and she does recommend different research elements that she did herself when writing the book, that if you wanted to explore it, you could look into those sources as well. So I really enjoyed that. Overall, I just think this is such a beautiful book. It's the second in the Luna Sisters series, and I loved the first one as well. Definitely recommend it. Please pick it up. You guys, this next one, whoo! So This Is War by Meghan Quinn. Listen here, I am a huge Meghan Quinn fan, or as the kids would say, I stan Meghan Quinn. I love her. I've read probably half of the books that she's written. I just think she is so funny, and she does such a great job with romances. She's in a league of her own. There have been a couple misses every so often, so it's not like I constantly give her like all of the praise there is just because it's her. Like, I have had a couple that I didn't love too much. This book, first of all, if you don't like spicy romance, you're not going to like this book, because this book was driven by spice. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on stars and 3 out of 5 on spice, which for this category of romances is pretty high, because usually that starts to go into like the dark romance territory, but this one, it wasn't dark romance, but it also was just mighty steamy. So this one follows Levi, and he's been in previous books. This is book 5 of a hockey romance series that she did. He has been searching for a mystery girl that he met in a bar a year ago. Well, he ends up getting called to his coach's office and suddenly comes face to face with the girl that he met in the bar a year ago, and it turns out that mystery girl is his coach's daughter. He knows that he needs to stay away from her because otherwise he's going to make a very bad decision, but it's not going to work out great for him because his coach tells him that he needs to hire her as his personal assistant. You guys, okay, here's the thing on this book. There's like okay, I don't want to say there's no plot, but the plot is not great. It's not as developed as most Meghan Quinn plots usually are. If I was rating based on the plot itself and the characters, because I didn't even like the characters, to be honest with you, this book would probably be like a 2 or a 2.5 for me. However, the way that the spicy scenes are written, there's no way I was giving this less than a 4. And I'm not even one of those people that really love the purely spicy books. I usually like it to be heavier on the plot side. But I don't know what it was with this book. I was just taken away by it. I'm shocked I loved it as much as I did. What stinks with it is that Levi is, like I mentioned, he's in the previous 4 books, and I loved him. He was just such a fun character, and I was so jazzed for him to get his own book. But he just like fell flat in this book, and the reason why they're like in the situation that they're in just did not feel strong at all. It was one of those things where it's like, you're an accomplished hockey player, like stand up for yourself and you can get through this. But like I said, the spice really carried it in this one. So if you are the type of person that enjoys to read really spicy books for entertainment purposes, I don't blame you at all, and this one would probably be for you. Like I said, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, but if you do not like spice, don't even pick it up. Just don't even pick it up, okay? I'm gonna tell you right now. You better listen to me. Okay, and then the last book that I read in the month of June was called First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This was a thriller. And I have been in the mood for a thriller for so long, but I've been nervous to start one because I needed it to just suck me in and take me away. And man, did this one deliver. This one was a 5-star thriller for me. There's absolutely no spice in it, so 0 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Evie Porter, who is a sweet Southern girl who is trying to overcome her difficult past and fit into her very elegant boyfriend's world. But all of her efforts are suddenly threatened when her past comes face to face with her at the Kentucky Derby. So with thrillers, it's hard because I don't want to give anything away when I do my review, but this was a complete 5-star thriller for me. I literally don't know what she could have done differently to make it any better. I was completely taken away by the story. It was written in a way that was incredibly simple. It was not hard to follow whatsoever. I feel like one of the things that I struggle with thriller writers is sometimes they try too hard and it comes across like they're trying to be smarter than necessary, and I just get thoroughly confused. And that's probably on me as a reader, but this one was not like that at all. It was incredibly fast-paced, incredibly easy to follow. There was not a bunch of confusing things happening. There was a dual timeline, but it wasn't chaotic. It felt very natural, and I loved the pacing of how they did the timelines. There was so many twists and turns, and there was some that I saw coming and then some that I didn't see coming. It was just the perfect thriller. So if you're looking for a really, really good thriller, I could not recommend this one more. It was so good. All right, so next up, we are gonna dive into all of my 5-star reads in the year of 2024. And I'll just be reading off the titles and the author, but as a reminder, I will have a full list in the description box. So if you wanna screenshot it before heading to the library or bookstore, you totally can. So my first 5-star read of this year was Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison. This is part of the Love Light Farm series. It's set in a small town. It's a romance. It does have a little bit of spice, but it was absolutely adorable. The next one is Worst Wingman Ever by Abby Jimenez. This one is actually a short story, and I think it's exclusively through Amazon. Just absolutely adorable. I loved it. Another short story, there was actually like a multi-author short story series, that was a lot to say, on Amazon. And the next one, Sally Thorne wrote Rosie and the Dreamboat as a part of that series, also a 5-star for me. Anger Banger by SM Shade. This one is a very raunchy romance, so if you like raunchy romances, please go pick that up. It's like unhinged chaos and pure entertainment. Christina Lauren, Dating You, Hating You. Absolutely loved it. It's a spicy romance that's based around, I can't remember if they're film agents or sports agents or something like that, but it's kind of like a meet cute, but then turns into a rivals to lovers situation. Really good. 2 books by Jess Heileman, Abigail and the Nabob's Daughter. I talked about Jess Heileman earlier in this video with her Plotting Summer, and I told you guys how much I love her. If you're looking for Regency romance books, those are the 2 that I would go to. She's gonna come up more later in this list as well. Failure to Match by Kyra Parsi. I talked about Kyra Parsi earlier. That one was really cute. Rope the Moon by Ava Hunter. If you are a fan of Elsie Silver's Chestnut Springs series, please go pick up the Runaway Ranch series by Ava Hunter. It starts with Tame the Heart, and then Rope the Moon, the one I just mentioned, is the second in the series. If you're like me, you might end up liking it even more than Chestnut Springs. Okay, just give it a try, I'm telling you. Next one, The Women by Kristen Hanna. It's a historical fiction set during Vietnam. It follows a nurse in the Army Corps, and it was just thought-provoking and amazing. Next up, The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center. If you are looking for the perfect romantic comedy, go pick up that book. Okay, just go pick it up. The Rule Book by Sarah Adams, another phenomenal romantic comedy. Start with the cheat sheet first and then go to the rule book. Both of them are awesome. The next one, I can't say that I'd recommend it to everybody, but it's the Mind F series by S.T. Abbey. It's a 5-book series, but the books are like 125 pages each. Very spicy, dark romance. However, it's got like a Criminal Minds, Law and Order SVU vibe happening, and there's like a little bit of vigilante justice happening. I could not put those books down. I like raced through those books. If you enjoyed Butcher and Blackbird, I know there's a lot of people out there that absolutely loved that book. I was not really one of them, but if you liked that, you would probably love the Mind F series. It's called something else. It's the whole word, but I can't say that, okay, on live television. It's not even live, Kate. You're recording. You could edit it. You get the idea. Next up, another Jess Heileman, A Well-Trained Lady. Absolutely phenomenal, 5-star Regency romance. Christina Lauren, The Paradise Problem. If you need a beach read, go pick that up. I want to say it's set in like Bora Bora. It's like a billionaire romance just done to perfection. The next one is a shocker for me. I cannot believe I loved it as much as I did, but it's Bride by Ali Hazelwood. It's a little bit of a fantasy romance. It's like a vampire and a werewolf situation. So maybe read about it first before you head into it, because it was on the spicier side. I want to say I gave it either a 2 or a 3 out of 5 on spice. Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer. If you need a romance that has a little bit more substance and depth to it, please go pick up that book. Oh, it was so good. But start with Part of Your World first, because that is part of the series. And just go pick up anything by Abby Jimenez. She does no wrong in my eyes. Another Jess Heileman, Somewhat of a Ruse. That one is a novella. So if you're looking for a quick read and you just want to get swept away by romance, please pick that up. Fool Them Once by Kyra Parsi. I absolutely loved that. Kyra Parsi is the one that I mentioned earlier. Not enough people talk about her. Absolutely loved that book. Plotting Summer by Jess Heileman. We just talked about that. And First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. Those are all of my 5-star reads in the year of 2024. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today to talk about all of these books. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram at Kate Chapters. If you're interested in seeing more of my book content on a regular basis, I go on Fridays now and I do a little recap, a 60-second recap of each of the books that I read, so you can kind of get more in demand before you head to your library. If you've read any 5-star books, please let me know in the comments down below so I can add them to my library queue, because I love to always have a bunch of great reads on deck. I hope I delivered whatever you were looking for when you clicked on this thumbnail, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye!